General Jim Mattis quits as Secretary of Defense. President Trump initiates DEFCON 1 on a government shutdown, and the stock market tumbles. Again, it's the year-end episode of The Ben Shapiro Show. All right, this is the final live episode this year. I know, brush away those tears. It's okay. It'll be all right. We'll get through this together, and then we'll be back energized and refreshed in the new year. I know I will. I'm going to take a vacation next week. I hope that you're also having a vacation next week. But first, we want to make sure that you are all up to date with the latest news, which is crazy. I have to say, the season finale of Trump, it's really ending on a cliffhanger. Like, as we go into the new year, I mean, there are a lot of cliffhangers that have yet to be resolved. Really a strong tease for the next season of Trump, the show. We'll get to all that in just one second. First, let's talk about how you send packages this holiday season, this Christmas season, because it is indeed Christmas. You know, Hanukkah ended a while ago, so you're not sending those packages. If you are, you're late. But if you're sending Christmas packages, you want to be using Stamps.com. Why would you use Stamps.com? Because it means that you don't have to drag all your presents over to the post office, wait in line, and then go through the whole rigmarole. Instead, you can make sure that you are sending proper postage at home, print it out, stick it on the package, the post office picks it up. It's so good, and then you're done. Stamps.com brings all the services of the U.S. Post Office directly to your desktop. You can buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter, any package, any class of mail using your own computer and printer, and then the mail carrier just picks it up. No trips to the post office required. It could not be easier. You can print postage at any day, at any time. Stamps.com is always open. And Stamps.com not only saves you time, it saves you money, because Stamps.com helps you print the right amount of postage every single time. We use Stamps.com here at the Daily Wire offices. I use Stamps.com in my own personal life for Hanukkah presents and also for nice things for people around the Christmas time. I use Stamps because it is so good for all of the aforementioned reason. And right now, you too can enjoy the Stamps.com service with the special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale without long-term commitments. Go to Stamps.com, click on that microphone at the top of the homepage, type in promo code Shapiro, that is Stamps.com, and use that promo code Shapiro for the special deal, 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale without long-term commitments. Stamps.com, promo code Shapiro. All right, so last episode of the year, there's a lot going on. So yesterday, the Secretary of Defense, General Jim Mattis, who is one of the most beloved members of the Trump administration by the general public and by the Republican base at large, he decided that he was out. He issued his resignation letter. He will be leaving as early as February. His resignation letter is quite brutal, but to understand what he's talking about, you first have to understand what it was that triggered the resignation. So a little bit of background info. Jim Mattis is very close to General John Kelly, who is the chief of staff inside the White House. When John Kelly left, that probably set the clock ticking on when Mattis was going to leave. But as recently as a few days ago, it has been reported, Mattis was telling friends and family that he was going to stay on and see this thing through because he wanted to make sure that the Pentagon was still being well led, no matter who was president of the United States. Well, all of that changed after the president of the United States, Donald Trump, decided to precipitously announce a pullout from Syria. And not just that, he's apparently preparing now a substantial withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, according to the Wall Street Journal. Apparently, he wants to pull down about 7,000 of the remaining 14,000 U.S. troops. He wants to bring half of them home in the coming weeks, the start of a total pullout that could take at least as many months. According to the Wall Street Journal, a day after a contested decision to pull American military forces from Syria, officials said on Thursday that President Trump has ordered the start of a reduction of American forces in Afghanistan. More than 7,000 American troops will begin to return home from Afghanistan in the coming weeks, a U.S. official said. The move will come as the first stage of a phased drawdown and the start of a conclusion to the 17-year war that officials say could take at least many months. There are now more than 14,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Trump announced on Twitter on Wednesday that he would pull all of the more than 2,000 American troops in Syria. As the Wall Street Journal notes, taken together, the Syria withdrawal and the likely Afghan drawdown represent a dramatic shift in the U.S. approach to military engagement in hotspots around the world, reflecting Mr. Trump's aversion to long-running military engagements with their high costs and American casualties. A senior U.S. official said, "I think it shows how serious the president is about wanting to come out of conflicts. I think he wants to see viable options about how to bring conflicts to a close." Now, all of this was not driven by the best foreign policy advisors around him. I do not think this is the position of Nikki Haley. I do not think this is the position of John Bolton. I do not think this is the position of Mike Pompeo. I don't think this is the position of Jim Mattis. I think this is President Trump talking to outside folks, including the dictator of Turkey, Erdogan, who wanted him out of Syria. I think he's talking to folks like Rand Paul and Tucker Carlson, who are telling him to double down on his views with regard to Afghanistan. And a lot of that is speculation, but knowing the president talks to outside sources, none of that would be particularly surprising. The problem is that decisions like this actually have consequences. So let's take Syria first. The president tweeted out regarding Syria yesterday, so hard to believe, he's very angry at Senator Lindsey Graham, who's come out against him on this. It's so hard to believe that Lindsey Graham would be against saving soldier lives and billions of dollars. Why are we fighting for our enemy, Syria, by staying and killing ISIS for them, Russia, Iran, and other locals? Time to focus on our country and bring our youth back home where they belong. So a couple of things about this. Number one, he has contended that ISIS is dead. But in this tweet, he's saying that ISIS is alive and fighting Syria, Russia, Iran. So which is it? Also, I've spoken out against the perception of our troop as a bunch of young innocents abroad, desperate to come home, as opposed to guys who signed up knowing exactly what they were doing, meaning they were there to serve America's interests abroad. I've gotten more letters over the last 24 hours from folks who are in the military, many of whom served in Syria, and who are saying, why would we possibly abandon our allies on the ground there? And the stories that are coming out of Syria are horrific enough. The safe areas of Syria are basically being protected by U.S. troops. We pull out. The Russians are not pulling out. The Russians are staying because they don't care. They're going to stick around. They're going to continue to build up their forward operating protocols and bases in the area. The Iranians are going to continue to strengthen their position in the area. The Turks are going to come in and slaughter the Kurds. None of this is good. I mean, if you're Kurdish, you have got to be livid with the Trump administration at this point. The Kurds have been screwed by everyone. They were screwed by George H.W. They were screwed by Clinton. They're not really screwed by George W., but they were screwed by Obama, and now they're being screwed by Trump. Kurds right now, I mean, there was a rumor yesterday by Richard Engel over at NBC News. He was saying that the Kurds are looking at releasing ISIS fighters specifically because they want the world to know that ISIS isn't dead at this point. Apparently, a lot of Syrian Kurds were walking up to U.S. troops and begging for their lives yesterday, which is just delightful. A good indicator that you are doing the wrong thing is that Vladimir Putin says that you are doing the right thing. Yesterday, the president of Russia, meaning the dictator of Russia, says that he agrees with President Trump's policies on Syria. Now, I'm old enough to remember when this was a bad thing for Republicans. I'm old enough to remember when Barack Obama handed over control of Syria to the Russians with his fake red line in Syria, and then handing over the leadership in Syria to Russia. And a lot of us shrieked bloody murder over it, saying, why would you possibly strengthen the hand of one of America's worst geopolitical enemies? Well, Vladimir Putin is very happy today, and there's a reason he's very happy today.
Announced that he will be withdrawing U.S. troops from Syria. As far as ISIS is concerned, I agree more or less with the president of the U.S. We, and I have spoken about this before, have really achieved substantial changes with regard to the militants in Syria and have beaten the forces in Syria.
Okay, and I will say that Putin then tweeted out, the Russians then tweeted out this morning, quote, Syria, I agree with President Trump that ISIS was defeated in Syria, but terrorists can spill over into neighboring countries and regions. The translation there means, yeah, I agree with Trump. He should pull out of Syria, but also, we're not. We're going to stick around. You know, for the security of the world, we're going to stick around. Yeah, right. Well, this has all prompted members of the Trump administration to go on television and then proclaim that ISIS has been defeated, which, of course, it has not. Stephen Miller was on CNN. Stephen Miller is, I think, quite good when it comes to speaking about illegal immigration. He's not nearly as good when it comes to speaking about Syria. Here he was yesterday explaining that ISIS has been defeated. This is simply untrue. Here he is saying it anyway.
The president says on one day that ISIS is defeated. The next day he says ISIS is there and let Russia take care of it.
ISIS has been defeated. But if ISIS wants to retrench and regrow and reorganize, it's going to be up to those countries to defeat their enemy.
Okay, so their enemy? ISIS isn't our enemy anymore? ISIS is now Russia's enemy? Weird take, Stephen Miller, and weird take everyone else. All this prompted yesterday Jim Mattis to step down. Apparently, he did so specifically in the wake of the Syria decision. According to the New York Times, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, whose experience and stability were widely seen as a balance to an unpredictable president. Again, I think wrongly. People were seeing Mattis as sort of the linchpin of American foreign policy inside the administration. I don't think that's true. Having spoken with many, many members of the White House on a regular basis, Mattis was a crucial part of the White House, but he was certainly not the leader on foreign policy when it came to deciding what came next. For example, Mattis was a big opponent of pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. Obviously, the Trump administration did so. Mattis was not a fan of the Jerusalem embassy moves. Obviously, the Trump administration did so. I think both of those decisions were right. So it's not like Mattis was infallible or was right on everything. But having somebody with actual experience in the military directing the Pentagon with a perspective on whether we should pull troops out of volatile areas, I think that was valuable. Well, he resigned on Thursday, according to the Times, in protest of President Trump's decision to withdraw American forces from Syria and his rejection of international alliances. Mr. Mattis had repeatedly told friends and aides over recent months that he viewed his responsibility to protect the United States' 1.3 million active duty troops as worth the concessions necessary as defense secretary to a mercurial president. But on Thursday, in an extraordinary rebuke of the president, he decided that Mr. Trump's decision to withdraw roughly 2,000 American troops from Syria was a step too far. Officials said Mr. Mattis went to the White House with his resignation letter already written, but nonetheless made a last attempt at persuading the president to reverse his decision about Syria, which Trump announced on Wednesday over the objection of his senior advisors. Apparently, he asked his aides to print out 50 copies of his resignation letter and distribute them around the building. And so this brings us to his actual resignation letter and the disconnect between what Trump said about Mattis resigning and what Mattis said about him resigning. So what Trump said is this. He tweeted out, General Jim Mattis will be retiring with distinction at the end of February after having served my administration as Secretary of Defense for the past 2 years. During Jim's tenure, tremendous progress has been made, especially with respect to the purchase of new fighting equipment. General Mattis was a great help to me in getting allies in other countries to pay their share of military obligations. A new Secretary of Defense will be named shortly. I greatly thank Jim for his service. So a very warm goodbye from President Trump. Also important to note here, look at President Trump's language. He talks about that progress has been made with the purchase of new fighting equipment. President Trump is very intent on seeing America as sort of a business. And so when we sell defense equipment to, for example, Turkey, he sees this as a win. One of the reasons that he is pursuing a Syrian policy in conjunction with the Turks is because the Turks just pledged to buy about $3.5 billion worth of U.S. armaments. Presumably they would have gotten that from Russia if they hadn't gotten it from the United States. But again, the idea that we should be held hostage over $3 billion of U.S. armament is just ridiculous. In any case, President Trump gives this warm goodbye to Mattis. Mattis's goodbye, not nearly as warm. So here's what he says in his goodbye letter, in his resignation letter. He says, I've been privileged to serve as our country's 26th Secretary of Defense, which has allowed me to serve alongside our men and women of the department in defense of our citizens and our ideals. I am proud of our progress that has been made over the past 2 years on some of the key goals articulated in our national defense strategy, putting the department on a more sound budgetary footing, improving readiness and lethality in our forces, reforming the department's business practices for greater performance. Our troops continue to provide the capabilities needed to prevail in conflict and sustain strong U.S. global influence. And then he gets to the actual heart of the letter. And this is the part that's pretty devastating to President Trump on a personal level and for the administration as a whole. I mean, it's pretty bad. I'll get to that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about your investment strategy. So you may not know a lot about investments, and so you watch the market with trepidation. You may look at the market and say, wow, I mean, I don't know whether it's going up or down, in or out. I have no experience with the market. Well, the fact is, if you want to get experience with the market, if you want to learn how to invest, the best way to invest is just by doing it. And that's where Robinhood comes in. It's an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission-free. They strive to make financial services work for everybody, not just the wealthy. I've seen the app itself. A bunch of folks in the office use it. I've seen how it operates. It is clean. It is easy to use. It is really easy to understand. They have charts and market data. You can place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. The Robinhood web platform also lets you view stock collections as well and gather information. It really makes investment easy. Again, I've looked at it myself, and folks in my office use it. Other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade. Robinhood doesn't charge commission fees. You trade stocks and you keep all the profits. And again, you're learning how to invest as you build your portfolio. And a lot of people say, well, don't do that while the market's going down. Well, actually, that's actually a pretty good time to buy stock generally. Robinhood is giving listeners a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help build your portfolio. Sign up at shapiro.robinhood.com. That's shapiro.robinhood.com. Go check it out right now and get that special deal, shapiro.robinhood.com, and get a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help build that portfolio. The app is just great. I've seen it. It's terrific. Shapiro.robinhood.com. Okay, so Mattis's letter continues, and he gets into some really tough stuff for the administration. He says, one core belief I've always held is that our strength as a nation is inextricably linked to the strength of our unique and comprehensive system of alliances and partnerships. While the U.S. remains the indispensable nation in the free world, we cannot protect our interests or serve that role effectively without maintaining strong alliances and showing respect to those allies. Like you, I've said from the beginning, he's speaking to Trump, like you, I've said from the beginning that the armed forces of the United States should not be the policemen of the world. Instead, we must use all tools of American power to provide for the common defense, including providing effective leadership to our alliances. NATO's 29 democracies demonstrated that strength in their commitment to fighting alongside us following the 9/11 attack on America. The Defeat ISIS coalition of 74 nations is further proof. So right there, that is a pretty subtle slap at Trump's anti-NATO talk and his rhetoric, and it's a slap at his pulling out of Syria. And he says, we have a coalition fighting ISIS. What are you doing? We have a coalition in NATO. What are you doing? And then he continues. Similarly, I believe we must be resolute and unambiguous in our approach to those countries whose strategic interests are increasingly in tension with ours. It is clear that China and Russia, for example, want to shape a world consistent with their authoritarian model, gaining veto authority over other nations' economic, diplomatic, and security decisions to promote their own interests at the expense of their neighbors, America and our allies. That is why we must use all tools of American power to provide for the common defense. Again, this is him pushing against Trump handing over Syria to the Russians. My views on treating allies with respect and also being clear-eyed about both malign actors and strategic competitors are strongly held and informed by over 4 decades of immersion in these issues. We must do everything possible to advance an international order that is most conducive to our security, prosperity, and values, and we are strengthened in this effort by the solidarity of our allies. And then he drops the bomb on Trump. He says, because you have a right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours on these and other subjects, I believe it is right for me to step down from my position. Okay, that's brutal. That is brutal. It's subtle, but it's brutal. I mean, that is a cut that goes deep because basically he's saying, I respect our allies. I believe in a strong national defense. I believe we need to confront China and Russia rather than backing away from them. I believe that we need to not abandon NATO and not abandon Syria. And I have this moral view of foreign policy. You don't, so I think you deserve a Secretary of Defense who agrees with you. I mean, that is rough stuff. That is rough stuff. He says, I very much appreciate this opportunity to serve the nation and our men and women in uniform. Signed, General James Mattis. Okay, very brutal stuff. Not a single word of praise for President Trump, which is unusual in a resignation letter. It's particularly unusual in this administration where every resignation letter contains fulsome praise for the President of the United States. This is having some pretty brutal impacts inside the Republican Party. I'll explain that in just a second. So a lot of Republicans, I've been getting texts from people who are real Trump fans, people who are deep Trump believers, very disquieted about Mattis's resignation, about his policy in Syria, President Trump's policy in Syria, about the criminal justice reform that went through earlier this week, about the machinations on the wall, which we'll get to in just a second. A Fox News reporter, I'm trying to remember her name, Jennifer Griffin. She spoke yesterday on Fox News about what is happening over at the Pentagon. She said the morale has never been lower over at the Pentagon because Mattis was well-liked.
I was told by a very well-placed source here in the Pentagon that morale has never been lower at meetings here at the Pentagon of the top brass in the last few days to discuss the pullout of troops from Syria.
You can see that the worm is starting to turn a little bit for some members of Trump's base. Fox and Friends co-host Brian Kilmeade, he's a really nice guy, a friend of mine. Brian Kilmeade, who's been a very, very strong Trump supporter throughout his administration and before, he said that President Trump today had refounded ISIS and was giving Russia a big win. He was talking with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. He said he is also doing exactly what he criticized President Obama for doing. Here's what Kilmeade had to say.
They continue to have a good relationship, but they disagree on a number of fronts that he outlined. And but at the end of the day, the American people elected one person to be the commander-in-chief and to make decisions. Look, and he served the president and this country. He served in this administration for 2 years, and he served the country and the military for over 4 decades. An incredible person, an incredible servant to this country, and somebody that we have the highest amount of respect for and wish him very well and look forward to continuing to work with him over the next 2 months.
Well, Kilmeade then just slammed her. He said President Trump accused Obama of founding ISIS, and then he said President Trump just refounded ISIS because they have 30,000 men there. They're already striking back with our would-be evacuation. The president is really on the griddle with this. And then Sanders said that she respectfully disagreed with Kilmeade, and then she said the idea the president has anything to do with helping ISIS reemerge is absolutely outrageous. And Kilmeade said correctly, leaving is helping. Right? This was the case that was made against Barack Obama. And then Sanders says, if ISIS wants to pick a fight with somebody, they sure as heck don't want to pick one with Donald Trump because he will destroy them and defeat them, except that we're leaving. Again, what drove this decision in the first place is President Trump's warmth toward a dictator, Erdogan, in Turkey. Right? Listen, there are a lot of folks today who are saying this is the right move. We need to pull out. There was no long-term strategy. This is the crew that always says endless war, endless war. We can't have endless war. I didn't like this argument when it was made by Barack Obama with regard to the Iran deal. What people in foreign policy like to do is create false binary arguments. These false binary arguments go something like this. If you don't sign on to the Iran deal, you are for endless war with Iran. You want nuclear war with Iran. It's a lie. There are lots of things I want with Iran. War is not one of them. What I would prefer is sanctions on Iran. What I would prefer is maybe thinking about closing the Straits of Hormuz. What I prefer with Iran is trying to find dissenters inside Iran who can lead a revolution against the presiding power over there. What I want with Iran is containment of their power to the country that they already control. But Barack Obama's people were saying things like, no, if you don't back the Iran nuclear deal, you want war. We got the same thing with North Korea from President Trump. If you don't back President Trump's talks with the lying North Korean government, the lying, murderous, genocidal North Korean government, then this is because you want war with North Korea. Or maybe I don't think they should be legitimized on the world stage. And now we're getting the same routine on Syria. If you don't want to pull 2,000 troops out of Syria and leave the Kurds defenseless as they get slaughtered by the Turks, if you don't want to leave a bunch of people defenseless to ISIS, if you don't want to leave a bunch of people at the mercies of Bashar Assad, by the way, all these things have externalities. You know, they all have externalities. ISIS hasn't exactly been quiet over the past few years in the West. ISIS hasn't exactly been inoffensive in its expulsion of millions of refugees from this area, many of whom are swamping Europe. But the idea is that if you don't want to pull these troops, then you want endless war. You just want to fight in Syria endlessly and leave our troops there endlessly. Same thing in Afghanistan. We can't have an endless war. Well, what about the alternative? What about the alternative, which is foreign policy is really a game of catch as catch can. And we got to be honest about what foreign policy is. We've never been honest about what foreign policy is because we have this blinkered vision that foreign policy should always end the way World War I or World War II ended, with some sort of surrender and a signing of a document. No war since then has ended that way. Maybe the Korean War, to a certain extent, but even that was maintained by American military presence in South Korea that continues to this day. The reality is that war is no longer about simply going in, defeating an enemy, and then occupying the country until it is a Western-style democracy. At least Germany had a history of Western-style democracy before the Nazis came to power. The same thing simply was not true in Afghanistan. The question is, what's in our interest? And is it in our interest to pull out and allow al-Qaeda to reconstitute and allow Pakistan to possibly fall to al-Qaeda and the Taliban? Because that's a serious possibility, by the way. Remember that as Afghanistan strengthens, there's going to be spillover into Pakistan, and Pakistan is a nuclear-armed state. I mean, there are all sorts of ramifications to foreign policy that are uncomfortable to think about, but that are quite real. And the simplistic, let's just bring our troops home stuff, it doesn't work, which is why I promise you that within 2 years, President Trump will be reinserting troops in Syria when something goes wrong. Okay, we'll get to all of that. I want to get to the government shutdown and the Mexico stuff in just 1 second, because that's the other big news item that's coming out today. But first, let's talk about how you're going to cook these holidays. With the holidays fast approaching, with Christmas fast approaching, meal prep is the last thing you want on your plate. You don't want to be spending all of your time over at the grocery trying to figure out the recipes. Instead, why not use Blue Apron? Blue Apron really gives everyone a better way to cook. A lot of folks around the office have been using Blue Apron. They've been raving about it to me. They talk about the meals that they've made. And these things are like gourmet meals. They're chef-designed recipes that use fresh, seasonally inspired ingredients, meals worth sharing on social media in as little as 20 minutes. Blue Apron takes the chore out of meal prep. The website and mobile app make it easy to plan meals each and every week. You never have to worry about last-minute trips for forgotten ingredients. They send the ingredients directly to you with the recipe. It makes everything super easy. Check out this week's menu. Get your first 3 meals for free at blueapron.com/Shapiro. That's blueapron.com/Shapiro. Blue Apron is indeed a better way to cook. I mean, I'm looking at these meals. This is stuff you're cooking yourself. It just looks delicious. I'm getting hungry just looking at this. It's like Korean-style popcorn chicken with jasmine rice and roasted broccoli and seared steaks and loaded mashed potatoes and panko-crusted chicken and maple dipping sauce. I mean, this stuff is gourmet stuff. You're making it in your own home. It's going to be delicious. Go check it out right now. blueapron.com/Shapiro. They make it super easy and super fast and super fresh. It's great. blueapron.com/Shapiro. Go check it out right now. Okay, so meanwhile, as all of this chaos is happening with Mattis and Syria and Afghanistan, chaos is happening on the home front, too. The stock market tumbled some 500 points yesterday, which means that we have now erased all gains since the start of the Trump presidency on the S&P 500 as well. The U.S. stock swooned for a second day Thursday after the Federal Reserve raised benchmark interest rates and said it would continue to let its massive balance sheet shrink at the current pace. You do have to say at this point that the Fed is obviously taking a pretty harsh position with regard to the Trump administration. Now, there are 2 ways to read what the Fed is doing by raising interest rates. One, they're saying the market is wrong, the market is incorrect, the fundamentals underlying the economy are still strong, and so we're raising the interest rates knowing that the fundamentals of the economy are still strong. Possibility number 2, the Fed is basically saying, look, we need to raise interest rates anyway because they're just too low. We can't have another bubble that bursts, so we are tightening up the interest rates right now, and if that costs the economy, it costs the economy. That would explain why Trump is so ticked at the Federal Reserve. It also explains why, listen, I'm not a fan of the Federal Reserve. On this one, I am with Ron Paul. I think the Federal Reserve does more harm than good. I think a predictable rate of inflation, according to Milton Friedman's economics, would be preferable. Frankly, I'm in favor of going back to a generalized price of the dollar pegged to the price of gold so that we at least have an objective measure of what the dollar is worth. In any case, The Dow and NASDAQ posted their lowest closes since October of 2017. This is the worst year for the stock market as currently constituted since 2008, which is the beginning of the recession. Is this actually going to lead to a new recession? Unclear at this point, but obviously indicators are not great. Today, the Dow is up slightly. It's probably going to even out today, but there was a big drop yesterday. And if you look at what the Dow has done over the last month, as of December 3rd, the Dow was at nearly 26,000. Today, it is below 23,000. That is a massive drop in just 1 month. If you look at it over the last 6 months, what you are seeing right now is that the high point in the last 6 months was Wednesday, October 3rd, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average was at nearly 27,000, and now it is down below 23,000. So that is a massive, massive sell-off, and you are seeing that basically, you're seeing that basically continue. I think that it's a pattern, and it's emerging, and it's a serious issue. Okay, with all this chaos happening, what we could really use right now is a government shutdown. Now, as I said yesterday, I'm not against a government shutdown. I don't think government shutdowns matter very much. I don't think people care about them as much as the political class chatters about them. When the government shuts down, not all that much actually shuts down. You still get your mail during Christmas. You still get your Medicare during Christmas. You still get your Social Security during Christmas. It's all the non-mandatory spending, the non-essential government services that shut down. So what exactly happens? 9 departments close. About 420,000 people work without pay. That would be the people in the departments of Agriculture, the Treasury, Homeland Security, the Interior, State, Housing and Urban Development, Transportation, Commerce, and Justice. All right, so fine. Hundreds of thousands of federal employees deemed essential are still forced to work over the holidays without pay, according to the data compiled by the Senate Democrats, but they're going to get paid again, okay? The idea that we're not going to give them back pay when the government stops the shutdown is just nonsense. So honestly, you could find places that are going to float you a little bit of money for the holidays while the government shuts down, knowing that in 3 weeks it's not going to be shut down. You pay them back. With 90% of their personnel considered essential, the Department of Homeland Security is hit the hardest. Again, they're still serving. So for you, the taxpayer, the answer is that these people are still out there doing their jobs. It hurts government employees, but it doesn't actually hurt the American people insofar as everybody who's still essential is doing what they're supposed to do. The national parks are likely to close. So they say that all 58 of the country's national parks would shutter over the holidays. But you have to ask yourself why you would shut open-air monuments. Remember, Barack Obama did this during the 2013 government shutdown. He actually shut down open-air monuments like the World War II monument. He put ropes to prevent people from going into the World War II monument, which is just silly towns. The Smithsonian Museum may have the funds to remain open, staff said in a tweet, but some of the agencies, like many of the agencies set to be impacted, they'll update that as the deadline approaches. Another 400,000 workers will be furloughed. Many of them will be furloughed in places like the Department of Commerce. Good news, 52,000 staffers at the IRS are furloughed. So if we could make that happen on a permanent basis, then I'm all for that. Apparently, if you are, because the funding for the State Department is set to expire on Friday, that could throw a wrench in the plans of international travelers. So you should have gotten your passport stamped before. Okay, I've been in that situation, but tough. I mean, what's more important, actually getting a permanent border wall on our southern border, or you didn't stamp your passport 3 weeks ago like you should have? So right now, here's where things stand. President Trump says he's not going to sign any bill that doesn't include $5 billion in funding for the border wall. Paul Ryan announced this yesterday after visiting the White House alongside Kevin McCarthy. Here was the outgoing Speaker of the House announcing that Trump was not going to cave on the issue.
The President informed us that he will not sign the bill that came over from the Senate last evening because of his legitimate concerns for border security. So what we're going to do is go back to the House and work with our members. We want to keep the government open, but we also want to see an agreement that protects the border. We have very serious concerns about securing our border. So the president said he will not sign this bill. So we're going to go back and work on adding border security to this, also keeping the government open because we do want to see an agreement.
Okay, so, that Trump is not wrong about this. As I said yesterday, I'm glad that President Trump is standing for this belatedly. Now, here's the parentheses critique. Okay, the critique here is that President Trump should have done this years ago. When it was before a midterm and when House Democrats weren't set to take over in the next 30 seconds and when he had more leverage. Because right now, House Democrats figure a couple of things. One, they look at the last election cycle and they see that up until the last couple of weeks of the election cycle in 2018, the election was actually quite close. Then Trump started jabbering about immigration nonstop, and he started basically a lot of talk about border wars and all the rest. And we moved away from talking about Justice Kavanaugh. And then the Republicans just plummeted in the polls, and they lost by an average of 8.6 points across the country. That was the final vote count in all of the House races. So Democrats are thinking, okay, if Trump wants to talk incessantly about the wall, let him do it. What do we have to lose? We have another 2 years until the election. They're also thinking, we're going to take over the House in 5 seconds, so what's he going to do then? So Trump picked I'm glad he's doing it. I am. I think he should do this. I think forcing the Democrats' feet to the fire is a good thing. I think he should do it with a House full of Democrats. I think all of that is fine. Should he have done this 2 years ago? Of course he should have done this 2 years ago, which is why Stephen Miller, who's quite good on immigration, as I said, he had no good answers, or he's at least good on illegal immigration. We disagree on legal immigration. He had no good answers when asked by Wolf Blitzer, why didn't the president do this like 2 years ago when he could have?
Why didn't he get the border wall done during his first 2 years in office with a Republican majority in the House and a Republican majority in the Senate?
Well, we actually have completed or have underway 100 miles. But the president's made clear that he's not interested in continuing to build the wall 1 mile, one stretch at a time. He wants to build the wall by getting the money now, just like the president was very clear about for the last year leading up to this funding fight.
But he hasn't received the
right
$5
now.
billion.
Okay, and then Miller got more and more animated over all of this. And now, here's where the Trump administration does have an advantage. The Democrats really don't care about border security. They don't like border security. And Miller pointed that out to Blitzer. He said, well, they voted against deporting MS-13 folks. They voted against a border wall. They voted in favor of sanctuary cities. He's right about all that stuff. It's also true that Trump should have done this earlier, obviously. But when Trump says that walls work, he is correct. And this is a winning political point if he is willing to press it. So the focus on the caravan that was coming to the border was extreme and overwrought. But his talk about a border wall being necessary, I think that the vast majority of Americans actually do agree with that, even if they tell pollsters otherwise.
Essential to border security is a powerful physical barrier. Walls work, whether we like it or not. They work better than anything.
Okay, of course, he's exactly right about all of this, and he should hold the Democrats' feet to the fire. I'll explain how that can be done. One strategy suggested by the president is not how it can be done, but I'll explain how it can be done in just a second. First, I want to talk to you about how you defend your rights. So our founders were deeply interested in protecting your individual rights, your God-given rights. And then they gave you the Second Amendment, which was designed to protect those rights, to allow you to defend those rights against enemies, foreign and domestic. And the folks at Bravo Company Manufacturing are interested in helping you do that. BCM was started in a garage by a Marine veteran more than 2 decades ago to build a professional-grade product that meets combat standards. BCM believes the same level of protection should be provided to every American, regardless of whether they're a private citizen or a professional. Now, as you know, when I talk about the Second Amendment, I don't talk about hunting because I'm not a hunter. I don't talk about going to the range because while I enjoy going to the range, I don't have a lot of time to do it. What I talk about is protecting yourself and your family. BCM is not a sporting arms company. They design, engineer, manufacture life-saving equipment. They assume that each rifle leaving their shop will be used in a life or death situation by a responsible citizen, law enforcement officer, or a soldier overseas. Every component of a BCM rifle is hand-assembled and tested by Americans to a life-saving standard. BCM feels a moral responsibility as Americans to provide tools that will not fail the user when it's not just a paper target, when, God forbid, you actually have to use a gun to protect yourself. To learn more about Bravo Company Manufacturing, head on over to BravoCompanyMFG.com, where you can discover more about their products, special offers, and upcoming news. That's BravoCompanyMFG.com. And if you want to find out more about BCM and the awesome people who founded it and run it, go check out their products at youtube.com/Bravo Company USA, an awesome company. I'm proud to be associated with them. BravoCompanyMFG.com. Go check them out right now. Okay, I have a lot more. Plus, we have the mailbag coming up, a lot more goodies, things I like, things I hate. It's the last episode of the year. What better time for you to subscribe? Get yourself an early Christmas present. Go do it right now. Subscribe for $9.99 a month. Get the rest of this show live, Klavan's show live, Knowles' show live, and coming in January, 2 additional hours of me, of moi. I am here slaving away to bring you the best in content. The least you can do is subscribe. Go check it out for $9.99 a month. Also, we have new Daily Wire backstages. You can be part of the mailbag on both the backstage and on my show. So many goodies coming. You're not going to believe the goodies. There's really a lot of good stuff happening. And with the annual subscription, you get this. The very greatest in beverage vessels, the Leftist Tears hot or cold tumbler. Drink from it. Feel the happiness flow through you. Okay? It doesn't just provide you with liquid. It also provides you with happiness. I know, because as I hold this in my hand, I know that my life is better, more secure, more complete. Yours can be too. Maybe I'm investing too much emotion in this, but maybe you should. Maybe you should. Go check it out. Leftist Tears hot or cold tumbler, $99 a year with the annual subscription. Go check that out right now. Please follow us over at YouTube or at iTunes. I know tons of people have done that this year. We thank you. Really, we are so grateful to all our subscribers, to all the people who listen to the show, to all the people who subscribe over at YouTube and iTunes, all the people who leave us reviews at iTunes. It's made our show incredibly popular and allowed us to get out our message, which is really the important part. That's the part I really care about when I get up every day. I can't thank our listeners enough. You guys make the show worth doing. You spreading the show through word of mouth means everything to me. And spreading the ideas, more importantly even than the show, spreading the ideas, word of mouth, is deeply important. That's how we are going to fix the country and save the country and preserve our institutional ideals. When you join the team, I really think that's what you're doing. That's why I do this. I was doing this long before we were all this popular. I've been doing this for literally half my life because I care so much about these ideas, and it's a pleasure and an honor to have you on the team as well. So go over and subscribe if you haven't already, because you should be part of the team too. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation.